Hi, welcome to the 14-day weather forecast. I'm recording this on New Year's Eve, and at the moment there is a lot of speculation about the possibility of colder weather developing as we head into the early part of 2025. So, is there any truth in the rumours? Well, let's see, and I'll start with the view across Europe and the North Atlantic. This is the picture at 18 GMT, Tuesday the 31st of December, the last day of 2024. It's unsettled. We've got low pressure air centre to the north, a brisk Atlantic flow pushing across all parts of the UK. Now, if you look out to the west for some heavy outbreaks of rain, and those are going to be moving eastwards and southwards, strong winds associated with them too, but then colder Arctic air pushes down across all parts of the UK. You see high pressure is centred to the west, to the northwest. So a big change taking place through the first few days. It's possible to be confident about that. But then what happens? Well, on this particular view of the world from the GFS computer model, we see areas of low pressure beginning to push up from the southwest. There's also some activity there in the north, which could be bringing some longer outbreaks of rain, sleet and snow. But it's really the southwest where I think it's worth looking at, because what we see here is heavy outbreaks of snow moving across parts of southern and central Britain before those areas of low pressure slip away. High pressure to the northwest becomes more strongly established once more. So we're finishing with a cold end to the first week after those areas of low pressure have pulled away. But I'm going to show several different computer models later on, because there is, as I say, a lot of uncertainty about whether those areas of low pressure will track further north or further south, and in turn that makes a big difference on which parts of the country you can expect to see sleet or snow or rain, or to remain completely dry. Sticking with the GFS model for the moment, here is the upper air temperature and jet stream sequence. The mottled shaded area shows where the jet stream is. The UK is right under it at the start. It's the blues and purples which are used to indicate cold air, the greens, yellows and oranges, the milder air masses. So if I run this sequence, what we see is the blues quickly move down across the UK. It's then more or less staying over all areas through the first week, but as I say, there is a lot of uncertainty about whether those areas of low pressure will be bringing the milder air back into southern and particularly southern Britain. But on the GFS model here, it's really staying cold throughout. Let's have a look at some surface charts using the UKV model initially to see what can be expected. New Year's Day here, it's important just to consider the rain, because there are some heavy outbreaks of rain there which are moving southeastward, squally, strong winds associated with them, maybe 40, 50, 60 miles an hour in much of southern and possibly central England. But the wet and windy weather does clear away, and then we can see the pink shading in the north is indicating sleet and snow showers. Forwards to Thursday the 2nd. All changed now. The cold air has moved right down across the UK. Snow showers mostly in northern Scotland and in coastal counties, mostly in eastern coastal counties, a few into Northern Ireland and maybe into Wales and the southwest, where they will be more mixed in terms of the precipitation. But it's very cold by this point. Only 3, 4, 5 degrees in the south. Over parts of the north, their temperatures remaining sub-zero. Forwards to Friday, the same story really. There could be a few wintry showers at this point pushing through the Cheshire Gap into central parts of England. It's just something to keep an eye on, but I think most of the snow will be in the northern half of Scotland. That's also where the lowest temperatures are, but as I say, cold everywhere. And the other thing of note is going to be the widespread frosts, because in parts of the UK, December has basically been frost free. So I think this will come as quite a big shock. I'm just using them to illustrate potential overnight lows. The one on the left here is Thursday, the one on the right Friday morning. You can see well below freezing in virtually the whole of the UK. We could see values down to -5, -10 Celsius in places. Now, going forwards into the weekend when the fun and games may or may not start. On the left, we've got the UKV model, basically as far ahead as it runs. This is the high resolution one which the UK Met Office operate. On the right, the American GFS model, which the initial animations were based on. You can see at 15 GMT, the UKV's completely dry across southern and central Britain, some snow showers, wintry showers in the north, maybe more persistent outbreaks of precipitation. But nonetheless, the key difference with the GFS is that it has those areas of low pressure bumping into the cold air and bringing rain, sleet and snow into the south. You can see the snow risk there, well, it's probably mostly London and a little bit northwards, with rain more likely close to the south coast. But for such big differences in terms of the details, even though the track of those low pressure systems isn't really very different on a global scale, it is on in terms of the size of the United Kingdom. And moving forwards to Sunday, what we see again is the GFS bringing further outbreaks of rain, sleet and snow into the south, some snow showers there in the north. It's very cold in all areas, but if you look on close to the bottom of the temperature chart on the right there, it's 11 or 12 Celsius in northern France into the English Channel. So the boundary between the cold and mild air masses is very, very close to southern England. It would take virtually no change at all for it to be a tad further north and that snow to fall as rain, at least in the south, and the boundary means the snow risk would then be into central, maybe northern parts of England. Forwards to Tuesday. By this point, the GFS has high pressure building back in strongly from the west for northwest. It's very cold, it's mostly dry. Just to highlight some of the uncertainty towards the end of the first week, I'm going to use the Mogreps G temperature forecast. So each line represents one of the runs in this particular ensemble model. They're very tightly clustered through the first few days, as you would expect, so basically all showing the same profile. But then as we head towards the end of the first week, you'll see a number of runs there on the right hand side of the chart are bringing values as high as 10, 11 Celsius for two clusters, I think. One of them is bringing in this much milder air into the south, at least for a time. The other is keeping it cold or very cold. So it's highlighting the uncertainty. Moving further northwards into Leeds, again, Mogreps G, what we see here is that basically all of the runs are keeping this part of the UK under the cold conditions. So the milder air may or may not move north of London, but the chance of it reaching Leeds, at least according to this, is low. Well, here's the snow depth animation generated from Mogreps G. It's covering the period from Saturday the 4th to Tuesday the 7th. Maybe you want to freeze frame it, as it's a good way of assessing what each of the individual stamps are showing. But the message here is there is a high chance of snow in the north, although a lot of that probably falling in the form of showers. There is a significant risk in central and southern areas, but the snow-rain boundary will be moving. The M4 corridor may provide a rough guide with a greater chance of rain to the south of it, a greater chance of snow to its north. But it's really very, very important to emphasise the low level of confidence, because those areas of low pressure could well stay to the south of the UK. Here are the accumulations, precipitation accumulations for days 0 to 5 from the ECM and GFS models. Wettest in the northwest, but it's really important, I think, just to say that a lot of the rain here is going to be falling early on. Then moving forwards to the 0 to 10 day period, the GFS on the right has much higher totals in southern Britain than the ECM, but the ECM has conversely a lot higher totals in the north and the west, and it's highlighting the differences in how they are handling the movements of those areas of low pressure. GFS keeping them down to the south, ECM is bringing them further north, as you'll see in a moment, because here is the deterministic model comparison for the end of the first week. Starting with the GFS, at this point, Tuesday the 7th of January, high pressure is centred to the northwest, very cold air moving down its eastern flank over all parts of the United Kingdom. The Canadian model also has cold air flooding southwards, but the German icon is different because it's taken that low pressure much further north, going on a northeasterly track. There is colder air beginning to feed down its western flank, but I think this is a lot more mixed, and this type of scenario would give a higher chance of rain, at least in southern and central areas, with snow more likely in the north, especially over high ground. Here is the ECM, and it's quite similar to the German icon. Some milder air in the mix here. I think a lot of rain, especially over low ground. There may well be some snow over high ground in the north, although even there with that milder section of air it would be somewhat doubtful. The ECM artificial intelligence model though is different because it's got the high pressure to the northwest and very cold air moving down. It has taken that low pressure further southwards and it's moving eastwards more quickly, I think. So we've got a very cold pattern in place at this point. Finally, the UK Met Office global, cold air here moving southwards again with that low pressure, possibly bringing some longer spells of rain, sleet and snow through this period to southern and maybe central regions. So lots of uncertainty about the details towards the end of the first week. We've got the GFS scenario with the risk of heavy outbreaks of rain, sleet and snow in the south. ECM, which is taking the low pressure further north, so in that instance it's just rain really. In the south there could be some transitional snow, but even in the Midlands and the north I think there would be quite a lot of rain in the mix. So it's difficult to draw too many conclusions. We've got the cold weather developing early in the period, but towards the end a chance of it becoming more changeable. The risk of rain and snow rises. It is worth saying though, I think that most of them are indicating that as we head into week 2 it will probably be becoming cold once more, even if it has turned milder for an interlude in the south. So let's see how things do develop through week 2, at least the trends as we head into the middle part of January. This is the 16-day GEFS plot for London. Upper air temperatures across the top, well below average early on, but the trend clearly is upwards. But from about the 10th, the 11th of January, the ensemble mean, the thick purple line, is climbing close to and then slightly above the thick black line, the 30-year norm. It is fluctuating a little bit towards the end there, but the general message is the coldest conditions are likely early on. In terms of precipitation, the risk is ongoing. The snow rows, which show the number of runs in the ensemble forecasting snow on a given day, are reaching a maximum of around 13 around the 6th or 7th of January. The numbers are decreasing as we head through the second week, but there is a chance still of there being some snow around. I wanted to show the ECM ensemble as well. I don't always do this because a lot of the time it's very consistent with the GEFS, but on this occasion the signal for colder conditions early in week 2 is weaker and there's a stronger trend there for warmer air to be returning. In fact, climbing well above the average, a lot of the runs the ensemble mean, through the second half of the second week. So some differences there between the ensembles, never a good sign. Here are the snow depth forecasts for London from the GEFS. So early on there is a significant risk, I would say, of some accumulating snow. It's not a high risk necessarily, but it is significant. A number of runs there are forecasting snow to settle, but they decrease later on. The 2-metre temperature data tables for London fall in a similar pattern to the upper air temperature profile. Very cold or cold according to most runs through the first few days, but towards the end there, the amount of yellow, light and light green starts to increase. So temperatures at the ground level probably starting to recover, but maybe at a slower rate than aloft, and that could indicate high pressure having some influence, with somewhat milder air returning at higher levels but staying colder down at the surface. The overnight lows, lots of blue in these columns, so frost would be expected to develop on the first few nights at least, and even towards the end there, 30–40% of the runs are showing sub-zero nighttime lows. Manchester, it's a very similar picture to London. The snow row values along the bottom are a little bit higher. Also, I think there are more spikes, so there is more precipitation through the second week. The snow depths for Manchester suggests that the chance here of accumulations is higher than it is in London. Quite a few runs are going for snow to settle in varying amounts. As you can see, the vertical column is showing the scale in centimetres. The 2 metre temperature data tables for Manchester following the same profile really as we saw on the London ones, although I think by the end there are still more runs which are keeping colder conditions in place than there were in the London data tables. Up to Glasgow, a little bit different now, because the thick purple line, the Ensemble mean, is staying below the thick black line throughout the second week, although it's just climbing above a little bit at the very, very end. But what this suggests is that cold air aloft is more likely to remain in place over Scotland than it is in southern England, and that really ties in nicely with the general pattern, which is that the cold weather will be coming down from the north rather than the east, and we've got the possibility of areas of low pressure bringing milder air at times, and that's less likely to be reaching Scotland than obviously the south, because that's the direction those systems are moving up from. Precipitation spikes, well, the risk is ongoing, and the snow row values are actually not that high. They can go up to 33 on these graphs, but you see really 4, 6, 8 I think through the second week. So a chance of snow on some days, but probably lower than it is through the first week. The snow depth forecasts for Glasgow, well, similar I think to the Manchester plot here. So as I've just said, the snow row values are not that high, although this would suggest that quite a few of those snow rows are leading to accumulations rather than just snow falling and not settling. This suggests there is, I think, a reasonable chance of some further accumulations through the second week. The 2 metre temperature data tables, lots of blue in both the daytime maximums and the nighttime lows, a little bit of purple at the very end there, but the signal is for those temperatures to be easing as we go through this period. But most of the runs are keeping it cold until the very end, where perhaps there is a trend towards it becoming more average. This animation is showing the GEFS snow depth forecast, basically for the second week. It's running through in steps of 6 hours, and the message here is it's very uncertain. Snow always is, even when looking 2 or 3 days ahead, let alone basically 7 to 14 days into the future. But the highest risk is probably early in the week. So outbreaks of rain, sleet and snow may affect southern and central areas, with wintry showers more likely in the north. The mean surface level pressure data table for York points towards high pressure starting to become more influential through the first 3 or 4 days. You see the amount of orange and even red in these columns grows. The red, pinky red, is for runs going for over 1040 millibars. They are in a minority, but perhaps 1 or 2 of those runs are bringing in high pressure, building it in from the west right across the United Kingdom. But towards the end, more mixed, I think, is a message. The amount of green and yellow starts to increase. There's also some blue. So perhaps as we head towards the middle of January, a more changeable pattern starting to return after drier conditions through the first few days. The GEFS mean surface level pressure plot. This snapshot is for Friday the 10th of January and it's averaging out all of the individual runs. Would indicate that we could be seeing pressure building up from the south, more of a southwesterly flow with cold air more likely to be embedded across the north, and that just fits in with what I was discussing on the Glasgow plot. The ECM model already looks a little bit different, and I discussed that earlier, how on this occasion the ensembles are showing somewhat different patterns through the second week. More of a southwesterly flow, high pressure building up there, and this would really indicate that the cold spell is ending if it hasn't already ended. This one, like the GEFS, is generated by averaging out all of the individual runs, so you would find some which are keeping cold conditions across all parts of the UK, but the message is that it's likely to be turning milder if this is right. So, to summarise, week 1, wet and windy conditions clear southwards on New Year's Day. It then becomes cold and frosty with wintry showers mostly in northern Britain, Northern Ireland and coastal counties. But through the second half of the first week, the risk of rain and snow increases, especially in the southern half of the UK. That continues to be the case through the early part of week 2. Therefore, it likely remains cold in the north, but there is a chance of it being milder in the south, at least for a time. Through the middle and second half of the second week, the expectation is that high pressure will be starting to have more influence again, so it's going to be drier. Frosts become widespread, although towards the end temperatures may be recovering. Note, the extent of the snow risk is very uncertain because those areas of low pressure could become deeper and head further northwards, leading to the scenario where it's wet and mild in the south, at least for a time, as I've mentioned. Alternatively, they could track further south, leaving all parts of the UK under drier but cold and frosty weather. So, there we have it. A wintry start to 2025 is pretty much assured at this point. What is very, very difficult to say is just how significant this cold spell will turn out to be, because some computer models are showing it comparable to January 2010, whilst others have a relatively short-lived cold snap with not much in the way of snow. Time will tell. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video and found it useful. As ever, if you have done, then please consider hitting the like button below and subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already. Of course, with all this uncertainty and changes on a day-to-day basis, don't forget to stay up to date with the very latest developments by checking out the TheWeatherOutlook.com website. Finally, I'd just like to wish you all a very, very happy new year and thank you for your support through 2024. Thanks now. Bye.